Johnny O'Connor bought an automobile. He took his sweetheart for a ride one Sunday. Johnny was togged up in his best Sunday clothes. She nestled close to his side. Things went just dandy till he got down the road. Then something happened to the old machinery. That engine
All right,
gun
here we
goes
are.
off when his hand.
This is the shop, and this is where most of our machining and parts making is going to take place on our Horseless Carriage project. So if you'll kindly follow me through these doors here, we'll go in and we'll see what the first steps are. I've already got a jump on us by starting on the frame, so follow me on in. Excuse the clutter. Some of this is just things that I've collected through the years, and it also supplies a valuable bunch of parts from time to time in projects. Follow me on in. Here's the shop, the big doorway. Over here, we have the start of our horseless carriage. Basically, it's the frame is comprised of angle iron, and in researching some of the early horseless carriages, I found one, a 1907 Jewel horseless carriage in the Maslin Museum, and its frame is built out of angle iron, much to the dimensions of this. This is 29 inches wide, because the body is going to be 30 inches. And it's going to be just under 6 feet once we've had, in length, once we've had the appendages put on. But how I've started this is we have over here metal cutting bandsaw. And we're going to put lots and lots of hours on this, sawing steel, just mindlessly sawing through steel. But back over here, I've sawed out tapers in this angle iron. You can see here some of the tapers in the frame. I've got this clamped down jig right now on my steel welding table. And steel welding tables are handy. I think everybody should have one. Tell your wife that you want a steel welding table in your living room. But in using the bandsaw, I've gone ahead and we've sawed our 45-degree tapers. And you'll notice that I've V'd the pieces out so that when we assemble the frame, we will have these slots V'd in here that I will fill with weld. Now the frame has to be square and it has to be exact. This is the very beginning, the preliminary to our horseless carriage project, and any mistakes now will just magnify themselves as we move on later in time. So it's very important to do it right the first time and not have to struggle with deficiencies later. One last thing while we're at this point is I just want you to look around a little bit and notice some of the equipment that we're going to be using. We have a drill press, like I say, the metal cutting bandsaw, we have torches, we have a welder, we have a grinder, we have a big drill press, we have the milling machine, and we have behind the camera a soon-to-be replaced lathe, going to be replaced with a bigger one. But these are the necessary staples of metalwork. Pieces like this, that just yesterday I had to saw this on the bandsaw. This is going to be a spring shackle mount on the frame, 2 of them. We will see in time where they fit, how they go together. But for the moment, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to have to get back to jigging this and welding this. Well, good morning. Today's the next day, and at this moment I'm sawing steel. Like we said yesterday, there's going to be a lot of sawing steel. And I'm making brackets. The first thing you do when you make a bracket is to know what you want to make, where the bends are going to be, and lay it out properly. I drill holes in all the corners where I come in first so I can cut a line into the hole. And I use this paraffin type of material on the blade when I'm sawing. It kind of lubricates things, plus it keeps it from galling when you're bending steel and trying to force the blade and make a contour. So like I said yesterday, there will be lots and lots of band sawing. There'll be miles of sawing brackets. Well, let's stop for a moment and take a look at what we did achieve yesterday after you guys left me. And what we did, this frame had been sitting up on the welding table, and this member here I had showed you in my hand, but I went ahead and assembled it and welded it in. And then that piece of square steel that I had in my hand were these, which I went ahead and bolted in. Now, let's remember that as you see this, all the bolts, all the rust, all of that is temporary. I'm just using out of this big bucket of miscellaneous everything bolts. Just what I need to hold things together while we kind of fit and experiment. But anyway, the full elliptic leaf springs and semi-elliptic is like half of them, what you'd have normally on a car, but the full elliptic carriage leaf springs are nestled very nicely in these perches which I had found. Moving forward to the front, and this will be the front of the carriage, you will notice, maybe you can notice, that a lot of these springs are still green from the moss that had been growing on them when I found them in the field. And typical of a lot of the old artifacts that we rescue, a lot of it will come from fields. Some of it will come pieces of steel with trees growing up in between it. And fortunately I don't get poison ivy, but sometimes that comes into play. But what we have is we have the basic frame, and I was fortunate enough to find these buggy extensions, which I just love. The actual body will come out to here, and the axle will sit underneath here, and it will be much wider than this. This is just what this is at the moment. So anyway, we're moving along, and just wanted to show you. We're already getting some bounce and things. And if you do notice that this is a little bit downhill, these springs are less expanded than the rears. That's all on purpose. There's a plan to it. One more thing, back to where I am here on this bracket. These brackets, this piece here, each is going to go underneath the leaf spring perches. And this extension is going to come out here and hopefully hold this cross member. This piece is going to be out here and bend up, hopefully holding the fender brace, one of the fender braces. So, not to give away all of the plans, but I want you to know that there is a vision behind this, and that you just can't cut and drill and throw too much away. You have to know what you're going to build, and I think we know what that is. Stomach growling means that it's time to break for lunch. So let's break for lunch. Front axle. Now, I started with something, and what I started with was a bent Model T front axle. And for any of you Model T enthusiasts or old car enthusiasts in general, I don't think I created the great sacrilege by cutting up anything that was important. First off, this axle was bent, and it had been welded right where I had to cut it apart in previous times, which means that somebody used it for the wrong thing and it had been broke. So I'm not purposely using a lot of old car parts, and in fact, even though I'm using a few old car parts here and there, I don't want to leave Model T Ford fingerprints on this anywhere that we see. So anyway, here's what I did for a front axle. Normally, a Model T axle sits in this position, and this was much longer. Well, it was 8 inches longer. And what I did in the middle, I cut it apart and I moved the two pieces together and re-welded it. Now, just to help you conceptualize what we did here, I cut, rather than just cut it across and butt weld, I thought it would be much stronger if we cut at an angle and then re-put the two pieces together. Now I V'd it out so that I could get a lot of weld and penetrate in it. And basically, let's turn it upside down here so it looks the same thing. Basically, that's what I did. Here's actually a piece, throwaway piece out of it. And there's going to be lots of that kind of thing. So many carriages, horseless carriages, had the axles overhead of the center point of the kingpin, and they had a truss rod, just a steel rod that connected the two together. And I'm going to have the same thing. I'm going to have a truss rod coming from this clevis, going here, going across, and connecting to the other side. And I'm not doing that so much for strength as I am just because that's the way so many of them were built. Also, to help you conceptualize, this is basically what the axle's about. It's going to have the spindles in it, and then the wheels will go on there. Many of you are already ahead of me and rolling your eyes and saying, well, we know that. Now, as we showed previous, we're going to have full elliptic springs on the front of this, and this axle is going to sit underneath the carriage about here. Well, I made these pads, which are going to be stationary, and the springs are going to sit on these pads. I'd like to show you one of those pads up close just to show you an example of the many brackets, that many things that we are going to be making. This was a piece of rod. We started with 3/4 inch threaded, turned it down on a lathe to 5/8 and threaded it. Cut these out on the bandsaw and ground them nice. Threaded them, screwed it through, and welded them together. These screw into this axle. The part sticking further will have a pivot type clevis that will go to rods that will strengthen axle front to back. Okay, lots of brackets. One more thing while we're doing front yet. We have this piece. And you say, why all that? Two reasons. One, I wanted a spring-loaded action to it. And this is very hard steel. In fact, I ruined a bandsaw blade trying to saw through it, and all I did was nick it. So I had to cut it into pieces in a grinder. And I had to fuse these two pieces together. I welded them. It also gave me a good time to put a radiator perch on here. I made these brackets, you might remember the other day when we were cutting green brackets on the bandsaw. And I've incorporated them into this. This will go on the cart about like so. The mark of a good builder is that things fit. Good or bad, this time it fit. But it will go on the vehicle like this. The springs will go underneath it. Like I say, in time, I hope to build a beautiful brass radiator in the front of this. And that will sit on this perch. The second reason, besides it being spring-loaded and allowing me that flex, the second reason I did it with all those curly cues, I like it. See, what I'm doing is I'm cutting the sprocket. I'm cutting the middle out of the sprocket the only way that I know how, where I'll get it centered. I'm just going to work at it until I'm almost through. And then I'm going to take a hammer and I'm going to pound the middle piece out. I'm going to stop before I have it break off in the lathe because I don't want an accident. And I already did one, so if you say I don't know what I'm doing, I had wonderful results about an hour ago doing one sprocket already. These sprockets will go on the rear wheel over the brake drums, and these will be the final drive sprockets. It happens to be that they're 11 inches. If they were 1/8 of an inch bigger, they wouldn't fit on this lathe. It was just providential that I found them. And I did find these sprockets and the smaller pinion sprockets and a big box of chain, all for $25. At a equipment place. Can you beat that? This is the previous sprocket, and I cut the center out of it, and I pressed it onto a Ford Escort, about a 1986 Ford Escort brake drum. I wanted a drum that wasn't fin. Now I know everything's all rusty. It's all going to get sandblasted. We're just putting it together in sort of a mock thing right now to see if it fits. Now these down here are Model T spindles with brand new bearings, and they are on Model A Ford hubs that I cut the kingpin stuff, all that off, and I turned them flat in the lathe, and I bolted them onto this axle that I'm making. This axle had started out as a piece of I-beam about this wide, and I sawed it down on the bandsaw to make it look more axle-like. And I'm in the process of welding spring shackles. They're going to sit underneath these springs. The springs will sit in here with the bolts that come through both ends. And this happens to be a brake backing plate that I made. There'll be one on this side here that'll bolt on. We're going to put the Ford Escort brake pads, brake linings, inside the drums, and I've got new ones. But we're going to have them mechanically operated with levers. It won't be in hydraulics in our 1905-ish carriage. So anyway, what I was turning was the center out of the other sprocket so I can press it onto the brake drum. I will weld it in places, but I'll be careful so as not to warp the inside of the round, make the brake drum out of round by warping it. And like I say, this will go on here, will bolt on. The wheel spokes will then be in here. There'll be another flange, the wooden spokes, and this will be chain drive to a jack shaft in the front of the car. So we're making progress. This is the rear axle. I still got to clean up some of my welds, but I'm happy about this. I feel this is going to be a strong axle. It's going to be in keeping with the front. So that's where we are with that. One more thing before we go. Excuse me, all of this work is just dirty, and some of it is unpleasant. But I have installed the front axle into this. Basically how it's going. You can see underneath this truss rod, this thin rod, it comes from these ears that we welded on to the Model T axle that we shortened and turned upside down. You can see the pads. You can see it coming together. So I think we're making progress. Let me slide the door open. Is anybody here? Oh, all right. Hi, Ray.
Come on in.
Okay, thanks. I was wondering if we could maybe do a little fly cutting on your milling machine. Cut off some.
Yeah, let's give it a try.
Cut some aluminum hubs down.
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, wow. Well, we got the milling machine cleaned off. Ray, let me show you real quickly here just what it is I'm planning on building. See if I can find it here. Okay. Can you hold that back for me? It's right there. That's what we're going to be. A shaft.
Cincinnati.
Yeah. Built in Cincinnati. Yeah.
Yep.
And like I say, I've got the top bows and a lot of hardware. I've got patent leather fenders. The wheels. That's what we're going.
They're going to look close, aren't they?
Yeah, they're a little bit smaller, but this is a 1907 Jewel.
Yeah.
And dimension-wise, it's pretty close to what we're going to be building. The wheels are smaller. My wheels are bigger, more like the shaft.
Right.
So anyway, that's what it's about.
Let me see. I think, don't quote me, but I think Schacht also made trucks, I don't know in the same years or not, but it was only a couple of years, for city delivery. But you'd have to find that out from
Really?
Yeah.
When would that have been?
No, pre-teens or during the early teens.
Okay.
Not sure.
I think Schacht started in 1908 or 1910 and
Don't know.
went on from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of what this project's about.
Okay, we gotta mount the wheels up on the table
All right.
and start hogging away on the hubs.
Well, yeah, that's basically all we want to do, but that'll be enough. Okay.
Alrighty.
Pretty simple setup. Is this going to take a long time to cut?
Don't know exactly what we're cutting yet, but I don't think so.
Do you think that's aluminum?
It kind of looks like it.
What's the chances of it being magnesium?
I would say slim.
I could throw a handful of its sawdust in the stove and find out at home.
Definitely tell you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think what we'll probably try is a face mill. Get this. Kind of noisy.
How much depth can I hog off at a pass?
Oh, probably a 1/4 inch or something.
Wow. Well, this will be done for lunchtime.
It may be.
Wasn't much setup involved here.
What's that?
Wasn't much setup involved here.
No, I hope not. I think we're all right there. There's a ram out there ways.
What kind of mill is this, Ray?
Chevalier. Made in Taiwan.
I have to tell you a little bit about Ray. I met him when I was 25 years old, and he was 4 years older than that. In fact, he's still 4 years older than me. But anyway, he walked into my life at a very creative time, and to make a long story short, he was the exquisite woodworker that I wasn't, but taught me quite a bit. He was also the metal worker, as you can see, that I wasn't, and taught me quite a bit. And along with his brother Roy, the two of them are just, well, I think they're probably the reason that I'm able to build this project now.
Basically, I think what we're going to do is just 4-corner this circle, but make it flat. So let's see what it looks like.
Are you going to feed it automatically, or do we crank it?
Probably just hand crank it. Yeah. It's going to get messy. There's going to be chips everywhere.
Are they going to go all over the camera here?
Maybe.
Oh, good. That'll cover my eyes.
Let's see how this works.
Once you set me up, you can leave me and you can go back to work. I appreciate you doing this. You know I do.
Oh. Yeah, let's see how that goes.
Oh boy, like butter. There's one cut down. Okay, now we've got the other wheel mounted on the lathe in relation to the rims, so that what we take off at this side will bolt to the flange to the spindle of the axle, and the wheel will turn without wallowing back and forth. How's it look, Ray?
Well, not too bad yet.
It's a horseless carriage. We're not talking 100,000s here.
Yeah, I think we're doing okay.
And we're not using a fly cutter. What is this? This is a
Face mill.
face mill. We're taking the hubs down to about, what, 1.25 inches?
Or better, a little better than 1.25 inches.
Really?
Well, I think so.
Well, we'll leave them a little fat on this side, and I'll tell you why. The spokes come through, and the other wheels had a threaded piece that was cast into it, and I don't know what the makeup here is. So since these spokes run uphill into this disc, it'd be better to leave a little bit more meat on this side than we did on the other side.
Alright.
So stopping at 1.25 inches would probably be good.
Well, right now we've got Uh,
Let's see your face, man. There we go.
Why?
Okay.
we got about 1'700", so I don't know if you want to get down to 1'1/4". Or 1'400" is right about the top of
The spoke.
spoke corner there. Maybe 375, 1 3/8", something like that.
1 3/8 would be good.
Okay.
Look good. Hubs are all thinned down and shaved about 1 1/4". They will go on the Model T flanges just so nicely.
Looking good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think you got it pretty much done right. Nice.
Ray, once again, thank you so much.
Anytime, Jim, you know that.
Well, I sure do appreciate it.
No.
So
we
we-
will. Wow, these are neat though.
We need to make one then, right? Because you,
Why?
oh, you got backers.
Well,
Oh, you're gonna use-
this will pound and this will back.
Okay, all right, all right, all
Um,
right. Okay, so then we need to get ready to have a little, well, I gotta hook this up. It's empty now. I got a new bottle.
Can I set the axle across on here?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
You got a hacksaw so I can
Yeah.
cut
Or
down.
do you want bolt cutters or hacksaw?
What do you want?
Well, whatever you like,
Well, will I be able to put the rivet in if I use bolt cutters?
I think. I think.
And
Yeah.
now I cut down 4,
What are you doing up here?
but I don't know if I cut them down enough. You'll have to look to see how much head we need to squish through. $1 a pound at a junk store. Probably paid $1 for this box of this. Okay. Now this is symmetrical, so it'll go on either way.
So you probably don't want that much rivet, right? You
I don't know.
probably want like a 1/4 or 5/16 of an inch or something. See, so
Let me put a new
put a long
one in,
one in there.
and then we'll
And
say
get
how
this
much
here.
to saw off.
Yeah, we'll get this here pencil that's over here someplace that maybe ain't clear dull. And if we can,
Will that be enough to give us?
I think, well, we don't get,
Let's do this by process of elimination and measure how much I need to saw off, so I
okay, now
can just.
can we see the mark on there or not?
Yeah. That tape measure?
Well, I got one, but if I keep it
Or
over here. but
ruler or something?
Let's go get the tape measure, Argyle.
This has got to be it.
Now, we need a hammer. So
Yeah.
we need a new blade to make the
No.
one over there. We gotta get- Do we need something better to space it over there?
No.
Well, here, let me hold this in, then you put that in. Where you want it here.
We'll do a tool.
Right here, right by the body, down, straight down below there. See, they like to bend over, is the bad thing.
Okay, yeah, I never did one before. Well,
Okay, now.
let's watch get your torch on my hand.
I could live with that. Yep.
No, wait a minute. Now let's okay, let's get the rest of the rivets in there next, because we're going to get ourselves so we can't get them in there after this. Find you another one that ain't. So do you want to make a new set?
No, we don't want to take that time
Well, that
today.
ain't a big thing.
It is.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got plenty of time to do this. Right.
These are underneath. You won't see these real. What you'll see is these new heads.
Yeah, but we need to.
That's the way it should
A
be.
little better, yeah.
Yeah, and it's me. I've got to get them.
Okay, we'll get that. It's hot.
Yeah.
You need gloves right behind you. You can get a glove of some kind. There should be one of each in different ones. You need the pliers. We got that. No, it's not. It's not me.
Okay.
You're on it. Okay. Just warm these other ones up.
And just hit them again. We won't take them out or anything.
No, yeah, we won't take them out. We'll just
Oh, I see. They're cooling before I'm...
yeah, you gotta, they cool pretty quick. No, wait. And heat her again.
No.
Well, yeah, then take your set to it. You might get it looking a little better.
No, it's underneath.
It's all right. You want it nice.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Oh, wait, we gotta get this up on the...
What's the torch? Okay.
And that one's bent over this way a little bit.
Which it just kind of come flat.
Okay, well, whatever.
Wonderful. Hey, thanks a million.
Oh, it ain't a big problem.
Really appreciate that.
No problem.
Uh,
It's fun to do these things.
well, you've done so much for me in the past. Charles lives on a farm that. How old is your house? Built
1845.
1845 in this barn. Have we looked around here at this barn yet?
1886.
1886. It's like a postcard out here. I wish that we could get a picture of it, but we can't. Well, thanks a lot,
You're welcome.
and talk to you one of these other times. I know you got a full day, so let's pack up and head on out. Thanks again.
Oh, you're welcome.
You need to put any of this stuff back?
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay.
You're good.
All right. Well, I'm grinding away the excess pieces of the steel spokes, and these were steel spokes and a steel wheel. And we're eliminating them, but more about that in just a little bit. back to the carriage itself. I think that having it mounted, having the rear axle mounted with the wheels on it will help you conceptualize sort of what we're doing. We got the axle back from Charles. We put rivets in it the other day, if you remember. And so I was able to mount the axle. And we cut down the the hubs away on the wheels over at Ray's. So I drilled the lugs. Now remember, all of these bolts aren't going to be the bolts that we put in place. This is just kind of to mock it up for the moment, to put it together and see what we've got and see what works and what doesn't. Now if you come around here, I'd like to just show you a little bit of what we did as far as the brakes go. Now we used Ford Escort drums, and if you remember, we bored out these sprockets and pressed them on, and they're welded on. Now I made mechanical expanding brakes inside that work off of this lever. And so you can see I've got this jacked up a little bit. When the wheel's turning, or when the thing's running, a rod from the brake pedal to this lever and one on the other side will stop the carriage. We'll have good brakes. We got new shoes on them. I went to the auto parts and got new shoes. But it's coming together. You can see the hardware, and actually what you don't see is all the planning that makes sure that everything fits, to make sure that these drums are spinning perfectly true, and sprockets and all that are centered, because if the drums are drilled for the lug nuts a little bit out of line, the brakes would just catch and go and you'd get a jerkiness to it. And don't want that. We want a quality ride. Now, what I was doing here just a couple minutes ago is grinding out the centers. We'd sawed all of the steel spokes out of these wheels, and they were just steel spokes. You got piles of them. Got 24 of them from 2 wheels, 12 spokes per wheel. And we're going to put wood spokes in these front wheels. And in time, if it works out, I may change the back aluminum spokes to wood spokes. But time will tell. Meantime, in order for things to continue on, we're going to leave those back wheels somewhat the way they are. Let's go upstairs to the wood shop. Okay, ye old wood shop. I'm going to be the Norm Abrams of the Yankee wood shop now. So let's come on upstairs to the barn here. Okay, it's really not much of a wood shop, but it sure serves the purpose, and we get a lot done up here. My friend Kim the other day said that one of the things that he thinks that I've been lacking as far as this video goes is explaining some of the thought process and planning behind things, because it isn't just an idea of building. He says, we don't see any of your figures, we don't see your thinking, your calculations, how you put this thing together. And I think if I did all that, it would just bore you to death. But let's just take one aspect of it, just to show you that some of what's involved. Now these will have bearings in them, and these will be the hubs that go on the front spindles, on the front axle. They're just exactly like the hubs on the back, for the back wheels. But now, to make wooden spokes, the spokes are going to sit this way, and then they're going to be covered with a flange that slides on and sandwiches them with through bolts in, lug bolts, eventually brass hubcap, blah, blah, blah. Now, in order to do the calculations for spokes sitting on here, they all have to come out at an angle. There's 12 spokes, 360 degrees in a circle. So 12 spokes divided into 360 degrees would be 30 degrees per spoke. Now, what I've demonstrated here is I cut just samples out of scrap wood and set a full protractor on it, and I cut some angles. 30 degrees each one would be 15 degrees per side, divided by 2, of course. And it comes out. My mock thing, if I set zeros and set 90s, every 30 degree increments I have a spoke coming out. So I know that the saw that I set up to make the spokes will be true. Now, they're got to sit tight against this hub. And the way that I had to achieve that was you get the circumference of this. The diameter is 2 point something or other, multiplied by pi, which is 3.14, and I arrive at the circumference, which in this case happened to be 6.83578. Well, I divide that into 12 so that I can get how much surface sits from each spoke sits on that circumference, and I come up with just a little over ½ an inch. I've got my figures here. If any of you write me, I can tell you what it is. But those will sit butted against here. And any other calculation I need for the spokes is how they would fit into the inside of the outside rim of the wheel. I'm going to interrupt just for a moment. You hear the wind? It's a really windy day and we're in the upstairs of the barn, but you don't hear squeaks because we use 3 gallons of glue putting these crutches together. And also, I just want you to, my great-great-grandfather John Carlton was a carpenter. And here is a set of wood clamps from John Carlton. Carpenter John. All right, now this happens to be a little bit bigger than the size of the spokes, and no, they're not going to be square. They're going to be cut down and turned in a lathe, but this is the way they butt together. This being a little over 2 inches, they will fit exactly right here. Now I did change the degree angle just so that they squeeze a little tighter back here than there, because there will be a shrinkage factor in wood. The sideways, the way the grain is, there will be a shrinkage, and when they compress, I want them to compress tight. This is oak. Most carriage wheels are made out of hickory. In this case, a friend of mine, Charles as a matter of fact, gave me seasoned oak, and it's a good wood for this, and we're going to use it. In fact, I'm arguing right now whether when the spokes are done, whether they should be painted or just stained and varnished showing they're real wood. You will see the fixture I made in order to get these angles right on our spokes. Now, for these angles to work and this measurement to be right, this width has to be dead on. In this case, I've got them 1 5/8 for each one. At this point, they will be ready to put into the spur and chuck them in the lathe and spin them so we can turn them into round spokes. And I think by this process we should have no problems. We should have nice tight wheels. Okay, we're going to have 12 spokes per wheel. We're doing the two fronts, that's 24 spokes. But I'm making 48 so that I have the prerogative later of changing those rears into wood spokes also, since we have enough wood. Okay, now this piece here, I've got this as a measurement, so when I turn this in and bump this against that, that's my distance for the final cut on the spokes. By having that touch that, this final cut on the spoke leaves that spoke a uniform 1.25 inches. They all come out the same the moment that bumps that. And this is how we turn our oak spokes around. Voila, one spoke. I think once it's sanded smooth, this isn't quite done, but once it's sanded smooth, the medullary rays in oak, it's the way the light will catch this grain, this sideway rays. It's just, they're going to look nice. I probably will leave them varnished rather than paint them. Hello, here we are again. We're outside this time. Today's May 2nd. Now we started this project about the beginning of December 2006, and this is, like I say, May 2nd, 2007. And personally, there's a lot going on in our lives. We have a new grandchild, and we're anticipating family moving here from Oregon. And I survived cataract surgery, which went very well. So now we have a completed chassis, and I'm taking it apart, piece by piece, disassembling it, and we have transmission parts here. They've all been washed down, first with kerosene to cut the grease out, and then lacquer thinner to dry them out so that there's no slippery stuff, so that paint will adhere. And looks like a flea market full of junk, but we've made a lot of those pieces. And what I'm doing today is I'm going to be in the process of sandblasting some of the rusty pieces. Sandblasting smooths out a lot of the grind, the grind scratches, and of course it takes off the rust. And just a word about sandblasting. I've got a big compressor, but it's just an electric compressor, about 18 CFMs in the back of the shop, and I've got this hose run out. And this container here is full of a black abrasive sand, and we're going to use this gun. It's a siphon method, kind of a Bernoulli's principle, where the moving air coming in from the compressor creates a vacuum and it sucks the sand out of the tank and through here. it's not a real good system, and it's slow and it's tedious, and I'm already starting to lose my patience after sandblasting 3 pieces. But I'm going to demonstrate it, and for this project it'll work just fine. Well, you get the idea. It's slow, and I'm not done. There's some rust here. But it will cut through and cut out all the grime, and it scratches the surface so that the primer paint will adhere better to the metal. And then when each piece is done, thank you, Roy, for the helmet and advice and many other things. When each piece is done, I'm taking it over to the paint department here, and I found that to just do piece by piece, there's really nothing better than using spray cans, and I use Rust-Oleum. In the past, Rust-Oleum has proven to be a good brand of paint. The gloss adheres through the ages, through the decades, I've found. It's got a nice deep sheen. Its primers adhere well to metal. So I'm priming, I'm doing this pulley, and I'm priming it. It's been sandblasted. Priming it in white primer. The rusty pieces, even after I sandblast, I'll do in red primer. And then I will take them and hang them on a pipe over between the sawhorses and let the sun cure them for the day. Finally putting on a coat of the almond, kind of an off-white almond color, which all of the chassis will be. So there's probably going to be a month or so of doing this sort of stuff, disassembling and reassembling the chassis. It'll be a while before we start the wooden carriage body itself, but I can't wait. Hey Kim, I want to thank you a lot for the hospitality, letting me come on up, saying 1910 license plate for Whimsy. A porcelain 1910 license plate, original. The carriage, as we've said, is technology-wise, mechanics and style-wise, it's about a 1907 to 1910 vintage. Coming up with a 1910 Ohio license plate. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
My assumption is that I'm supposed to take this with me and put it on the carriage. Thank you very much. This is what I mean. Let's go do it. Let's go put it on. I know I've got bolts. Beautiful day. Started working on this thing last fall and went through the winter and thought I'd be done by now, but am not. But here it is being assembled in the barn. You can see the chassis, almond, kind of a white, off-white. Also, I went ahead and I took a moment and I put Kim's 1910 license plate on the front. I just think it adds so much. Don't you? No body on it yet, but you can just see how some of the hardware and some of the metal work is just going to look delicious. The wooden spokes that we made, the oak spokes, they're varnished now in the wheels. They just kind of add a nice touch. Transmission works. Everything I put on it is fine-tuned now and it's working. I did start the engine. Let me tell you about this engine. This is the same as the one we had in it for dummy purposes, for measuring up before. But this one my dad restored in 1978. And it had sat for, gosh, the almost 30 years over in the corner of the barn, covered in dust and bird pooey. I put some gas in it, primed it, turned down a couple grease cups, cranked it, and it started right up. You will see that the engine has a fan on it that will run off the flywheel, and it will cool the cylinder, this fin cylinder. We have the oiler here, which when it's full of oil will drip oil into the cylinder, lubricating it. Same pulley arrangement will drive the transmission pulley. Okay, but while we're at things, let's take a look at hardware a little bit. Now, one of the things that makes any project real, especially if it's 100 years old, is authentic fasteners and hardware. And in this case, I've amassed through the years, and I mean literally years, a collection of square-headed nuts and bolts, this kind of stuff. And that way, when we put the fasteners on things, you can see it just looks so much more realistic than if you use cadmium plated hex head bolts and nuts. See all the square stuff? It's on purpose. Grease cups that you tighten down. This will be the crank mechanism. Oilers. This is an oiler where you screw this down and adjust the drip. It would be dripping on the transmission to oil it. Fasteners are important. In the shop, talking about fasteners and little details, I have this piece of furniture here. It's got all these little drawers, and it actually was a filing cabinet for like little cards, I think. And it belonged to my great-grandfather, Sherman, who was a doctor, and he used this in the 1890s to keep all of his records in. My grandfather shortened it, and he and my dad filled it full of tools and junk, and I continue in the tool and junk way myself, but I've opened a couple drawers just to show you some of the things that I do collect. I've got brass oilers, and as you can see, there's grease cups, all sorts of stuff. Here's some more of the same kind of stuff. Just hard to get little things that you would find on a car of the era that we're building, which would be, like I said before, about 1907, 1910. Here's even glass sight feed tubing so that we can build a sight gauge to see how much gas is in the gas tank when the time comes. But you see all of the sorts of fittings and stuff. So, just to let you know that it's not an accident when you see all of that stuff coming together. It really took years to collect a lot of this. back to woodworking. Well, phase 2 of the horseless carriage, where we start the wooden body now. I'm sawing out pieces of rough poplar that are actually native to this area of Ohio and many other places. They were sawed down in Bergholz at Danoon Sawmill, and I've had them stacked here for about 3 years drying out, since they're not kiln dried. And at this point, these boards are actually very stable and have found their way, and I feel comfortable working with them, that they're not going to twist and flex later on in the process. So I'm sawing out wooden struts and braces that are going to go inside of the body, and in much the same way that would have happened 100 years ago. We're going to be using a lot table saw and the router and a shaper and cut-off saws and the bandsaw and drill presses and a lot of the same stuff that we used for working with steel. The difference between steel and wood is that the tools run a lot faster for wood. I'll be using the same metal cutting bandsaw blades for wood, and we just won't tell the wood that they were for metal. But we run these things at a lot greater speed. Also, in the process of the woodwork, I have here my pet wood. I hope to be buried with a few pieces of this in my coffin. When my dad built the house in 1958 on Rockside, this, which I believe is called unit decking, I was 8 years old, comprised the roof of the house. It was a flat house, like was the style in the late 50s, and that roof did give them a lot of troubles. But you can see the double tongue and groove. That's all going to be cut off, but these are leftover boards from that, and they followed the family and through all of our moves, and I plan to keep some of them intact. I have a lot of affection for these boards because they take me back to that era of my childhood. But I'm also, as you can see from the new cut, using them when I need curved pieces of braces and I need enough expanse of wood to actually take them out of one piece. I can use this stuff. But I'm using it sparingly. This is pine. It arrived in a boxcar, a train boxcar from somewhere out west. And I remember, like I say, around age 8, my father and a friend of his having to go down and unload that train to bring the stuff to our house that he was building. So anyway, enough of that. We all have family stories. Let's move on downstairs and see what we've got going on at this point. I am excited about the wood. It gives me a chance to create. I like creating. I like the artistic aspect of building this carriage, and plan on a lot of art going into this body, a lot of style. Follow me downstairs. Well, we're about at the point of a rolling chassis. There's a few little things that aren't done yet, but most of the metal work is pretty well finished, sandblasted and painted. We've got some throttle linkage, some spark linkage, a few little brackets to hook up. And this is it. This is what we're going to be building a wooden body for next. There's a muffler, old-time muffler, trussed rear axle, the brakes and the clutch work. There's the tight and loose idler pulley on the leather belt. Patent leather fenders. Boy, did I get lucky there. That's another story where those came from. We're going to have to take a field trip over to Blosier's and see his several acres of artifacts and horse-drawn implements and carriages, some dating from the 1700s even. He's turned into a good friend, and we're going to have to go visit him. So anyway, what we're doing next is the body. Well, I've already got a jump on constructing. This is some of that poplar that we talked about a moment ago. It started, I sawed out a square piece, but step by step. See these holes here? This is a rail that's going to be sitting on the frame, and these holes line up with these bolt holes so that this rail is going to sit on the frame and miss all of this stuff. And yes, it took a little bit of measuring in order to coordinate all this, but I got it. And some of my dad's old wood happened to be big enough to make these curved pieces of braces. Now it looks all crusty and dirty and glue's oozing out and nothing sanded, but you have to take my word for it. We're gonna get much further along before this thing is writable as far as cosmetics go. But these pieces here, I'm using Gorilla Glue. This is the most fantastic glue. I'm also going to be using dowel pins, and I'm going to have mortise joints in places. But the dowel pins, 1/4-inch fluted dowels, birch dowels, that will go in with glue and connect things so that nothing will ever come apart. And I'm using 1/8-inch underlayment for a body. You can see how it curves nicely. I tried 1/4-inch. It just didn't work. I tried oak, I tried lots of stuff, and it cracked apart. I tried soaking it in water, and it just didn't do good. So this is me. But the walls of the thing line up so that those holes in the rail will fit. And this is the beginning of what the body will entail. A seat will start and go on here yet after that. Now, it's old wood. It was a sign, a church sign. Needs painting. This is the floorboard. And supposedly it lines up. Whoops. No dress rehearsal here, we're just doing it. Camera's running, I trust. And it will fit in like so. We get the idea here. Stepping up into our horseless carriage on the floor. It's going to be high. I've got some special rubber matting I've found that will go on here next. Okay, we're in the process of gluing. Last night I glued the pieces on the other side. Lots of C-clamps. Like I say, it's all metalworking stuff. But we won't tell the C-clamps that they're being used on wood. I'm confident that it's holding on this. I used Gorilla Glue on the braces where I had to have a lot of structural integrity. But I'm using Elmer's glue on big areas just because I can't control the setup time with the Gorilla Glue. And Elmer's glue is much more forgiving. Looks good to me. going to leave I think I'm going to leave a clamp on this joint. Just until I get the cross-section pieces, but let's take it out and set it on the car. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not, camera's running, let's see if we got her. Yep, looks like it. Wow. Okay, this is going to, now, camera lady, come on over here a little closer. You see these holes right here? These fit a 3/4 inch board that will come across here. There'll be a trunk coming across here. The seat will start on top of this, so you can get an indication how high it is. Can you move on in here? Just right over to here. See these slots? Can you see on the other side here the slot? Okay, we have the pieces going to come across here to form the front of the seat and protect the back of our legs from the splash of grease and stuff from the transmission and all of that. So it's coming along nicely. And we're not going to bother with camera work until I'm much further along. Okay. Beautiful September morning. Here we are, we're 2 months away from a year of having started the Horseless Carriage. Boy, how time flies. I never dreamed that I'd be still working on it at this time. I figured this would have been done by last spring. And yet I wouldn't have dreamed that it would be assuming some of the dimensions that it has assumed as far as well, the quality and just the intricacy of it. Already the woodwork is going pretty fast, and we can see how some of the graceful lines are starting to form. There'll be a trunk here over the engine, a shallow one, and a graceful one, the back of the seat, where the fenders add so much, don't they? So we're coming along. Here we go. Okay. There's a hole. These are fluted dowel pins. They're made out of birch. You see the little lines in them. We use those. They're kind of like nails. In barns, pegs are called trunnels, as in tree nails. But these dowel pins, we're going to use probably a couple hundred of them on this wooden body. We'll encase them with glue, and that will go in these flutes. And then it will just kind of tie everything together. And I'm using this, I told you before, this Gorilla Glue. Wonderful stuff. This glue swells up and expands and creates this foam, but as it swells up and expands, it just fills all the gaps and kind of pressure squeezes itself into all the pores. It's wonderful glue, like I've said before. Glue is not like it was 100 years ago when they were using horse hoof glue and things made out of all sorts of organic stuff. Glue now is just so much better than it was, even back in the old furniture making days. Let's move on over here. I just want to show you this. This is how the glue goes when it oozes out. It just swells up and makes a mess. But that's okay, because it's just... this easily. And you can see there's going to be lots of hours of that sort of stuff. Now while we're on this is the body. Let's just jump over to the front here, over on this white board. This is a lot of what we're doing too. We're gluing 4 and 5 pieces, and you can see how this glue swells out of this piece. But this is going to be one of the struts in the seat in time. Lots of this kind of stuff. Lots of glue being used. Wood braces. Using the metal cutting bandsaw to do all my wood contour work. What I did is I stacked 4 pieces of plywood and glued them so that I make extra thick curved pieces so that I can cut them out at angles from both directions and make compound curved pieces. This is for the armrest of the seat of the carriage. It's all going to get sanded, and you can see what comes off of that as far as the glue and stuff. Let's just clean this up here just a little more. All right, let's take this outside. Cut. This isn't going to be like this. This is going to get covered with a body, with skin, we call it. It's just going to be more veneered wood like this is down here. And this is all going to be covered here. Now these are curved out a little bit, and these are curved up a little bit. And the idea is that it stiffens the skin when it's not just a flat piece, but also there's just vast aesthetics in having all this graceful stuff. But it does create some compound bends, and it also creates compound pieces of wood. This is thicker than what's going to go on these skinny posts, but since this is flared out, and as it comes down it flares in, this piece is going to be cut where it's out, and as it comes down it curves in. So I glued together 4 of these pieces of plywood, but they're actually, when it's all done, going to be a curved piece coming out of that that's only like 1 1/8 inch thick. And this will sit up in there. These will get cut off. You can almost see it finding sort of a graceful line. There's a lot of these curved pieces. If we can look up here, you see this piece that's arched that way. If you were to side it the other way, it's also arched that way too, so that the back of the chair just kind of has a curve in it. And it's going to create a little bit of problems for me when I'm gluing the skin on, because it's a compound bend in both directions. But I'm thinking that I can soak the wood in water a little bit, and if I just baby it right, that I'll be able to get it to distort to all of that. So that'll be coming in the next phase.
Would you please do that again? turn it, and I'll say, this is my son, and I won't say anything else about you.
This segment brought to you by Gorilla Glue. Incredibly strong, 100% waterproof. Back to you, Mr. Carlton.
Well, now you know my son Jim. And Jim is here today. He's going to help me with this. If you see, this is the chair of the horseless carriage. And you can see it goes this way, and it also arches the other way. And you can see these pieces arch this way, and the whole chair arches the other way, which means that we have a compound situation that we're going to try to get this plywood skin onto. We just did a dry run, and it seems like it may work, But if it scrunches up and everything, we got a lot to lose. So we've made a jig on the inside to brace these as we put the pressure down. And as you've already heard, we're going to use Gorilla Glue because we think it's the best. Boy, we're going to send this to the Gorilla people. And we're going to try to do this now. I've been accused of making parts and people saying, "Wow, why didn't you show how you did that?" instead of just showing us after it's all done. So in this case, we just decided to be a little bit adventurous, and we're going to actually do it in front of the camera, and hopefully it'll work. I should have given you another tube, Jimmy, and you could be doing the other side. But about half it glue-wise. Okay, are we ready? Okay, now, yeah, let's push it up close to here. I'm going to use a piece of block in here to hold it down.
How much time do we have as far as being able to slide it around?
In this heat, we've got 10 minutes.
Okay.
Is your top going to work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got plenty of room. It's overall.
Okay, great. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, you have a big clamp on your side. Move it into the pencil line a little bit.
That's where it was.
Okay.
It was like right here.
All right. Move it in as far as you can go, because it'll all help. You got it in? Okay, here we go. Let's just go down gently and listen. Let's just keep listening. It may not want to pull all of them. Okay, I don't hear any cracking noises yet. That's good. I do see it's waving, but I think that once it dries, that'll come out.
Here's another wedge piece. If you want.
Oh, that should go underneath here. Okay, now will these clamps come down anymore? Can we? This piece that you just brought is great. Okay, we need. Oh, I see. I gotta jam stuff in there somehow. Let's see what. Screwdrivers?
Well, that glue's gonna expand, right?
Huh?
That glue's gonna expand.
Yeah. But when it expands, it doesn't. It's done with its. Look at what we've got. This here is the nose of the carriage. I call it kind of a Renault style because it curves and kind of a bull nose. There were other cars that had a two-sided Renaults, lots of them. I think Franklins, the air-cooled Franklins, were this way for a few years. Lots of other cars, but this is the woodwork. I've bent wood. This piece here, I soaked it in water overnight before I curved it, and you can see there's wood filler in it, and it's lots of things. The hole in the top here is going to have like a lid that opens and closes, but this will be access to slip the gas tank down in. Let's just look at it a little bit here for a moment. The insides, as you can see, I have my plywood laminated framing in here, and that allowed me, by stacking it together, allowed me to make compound cuts and make it real thick, so I could have all of these angles coming together different ways. You still see glue all over the place, but that will get scraped away. It's easy to scrape. Alright, and this hole here is the petcock and fuel line from the gas tank will go out through here, so I wanted easy access. Now you'll notice like these curves here, this wood, I made that. Oh, let's see, do I have a piece here? Yeah. I made that curved piece here. Here's a cut off short piece of it left over. This curved part here is done by just running it sideways through the table saw blade over and over and raising the blade each time until I've got this nice curve. And you can adjust the radius of it by changing the angle as you come through the blade sideways. A lot of people don't know that. They just think table saws are for cutting straight on, but you can run wood sideways through it, and if you're careful, make these nice things jigged. So this is what we got. We got wood filler in it. I'm using Elmer's brand wood filler. I like it. I think it's good. Kind of rough, but I've got the taper done. You can see where it's rounded and it angles down. You can see out here where these outriggers come. These pieces right here will be right above the frame rails. So I will have a carriage bolt that will go down through there and bolt that to the body, or yeah, the frame. I'm not thinking, I'm here with the camera by myself. Okay, now you'll notice that I've got these metal inserts glued in. Let's come around here and see what we got here. We've got the floor will sit in here, of course, but okay, and I've got this I put these great big threaded pieces in and I sunk them into these holes with epoxy, and then I drilled and tapped a smaller hole inside the threaded pieces so that I can put these bolts in, and this way I can bolt the seat down next on top of it. And now this is the assembly. I just set the seat on it. Let me stand back here a little bit so I can kind of get more of the, you see what we've got here. That's about where the seat's going to go. It's not bolted down right now. Here's the seat from the front angle. Looking good. Getting the curves built in. Very graceful. This whole thing is very light. I can pick this whole unit up and strain myself. I don't think that all of this is 40 pounds. Maybe just 40. So that'll be good because we build in an awful lot of weight in the carriage, and I'd like the wood to kind of redeem itself. You can see where the lines are coming together on it very nicely. That's where I think the strong point is. It's not necessarily the craftsmanship, the woodwork, although we are building in curves. These pieces come in. We're building in compound things. This curves out. We'll make a nice armrest that way once it's upholstered. Alright, well, here we are down below. Meantime, we're back to chassis again. The body, as you just saw a moment ago, is back upstairs as we're putting in wood filler and sanding and doing the contour tapering. A lot of people are involved. Charlie Brogan has lent me his belt sander and lots of tools. He's given me Bowden wire. We've got a brass speedometer, patent 1906, that suddenly may have to jump on this thing before it's done. And Ray Boehner too. This kind of bar stock here, this brass, big chunks of brass from him. We used that hex stock to make these and thus we made this brass railing that goes around the firewall. It was indicative of a lot of carriages, horse-drawn, sleighs, and a lot of the vehicles of the time, including horseless carriages just soon thereafter. So having a nice brass railing kind of set things off good. It will complement the bullnose hood once we have it in place. Well, the big day is here. We've got most all of the woodwork done on the coach. Don't know how much of this is going to show up. There's the hood. It's sanded and filled, and my son primed it. Finally end up sanding with 320 grit sandpaper. We could have taken it to 400 grit, but there's a point of diminishing returns. It's wood and the grain keeps reappearing in places just due to humidity. This is the shop. It's warm. We've got the body here on sawhorses. Looks good. Primered as it is. There's the body. Looking over there. There's the seat, although it might be a bit unrecognizable at the angle that it is. And there's Jim Jr. He's going to be painting. And he's asked that I extend him the courtesy of not filming and making him nervous while he's working, so we're going to abide by that. Especially since the price was right, and he's pretty skilled at this sort of thing. We're mixing our own green. It's a very dark green, and the shop is warm. We've left the dirt on the floor so the overspray won't get in the cement. It can be swept up later. We're running the gun off of the big compressor in the back secret room. It hasn't come on yet since we've started. The next time we see the body, hopefully it will be a fairly glossy dark green of our own mix. Well, we've moved on from painting. We've got the pieces of the body painted now. They're, I think, the perfect tone of dark green, just what I wanted. Thank you so much, Jim, for doing that for me. He's got a lot of experience painting cars and doing body work and things, so we thank him for that. Now I want to pinstripe the pieces of the seat and the body of the carriage. And I thought about using paint and those paint rollers that they have and lots of other stuff, but the fact of the matter is I didn't think that I could have that skilled, steady hand, and I didn't like the idea that the paint might not be quite as opaque as the brilliant colors that I would get from using tape stripes. And so you see, here's the seat. You can see the stripes that I have applied, a gold and a red line around the top and bottom of the seat. You can see the center of this seat, the appointment I have, the scrolled type appointment I have at the bottom, and of course the other side is the same way. Okay, let's go look at a couple other pieces. Well, here we are again. This is the hood, the front hood assembly. You can see the pinstriping. I've accented all of the angles with the striping. I think it came out great. You can see in the upper right hand corner and the scroll, just a simple scroll. Piece of something to break it up. I hope that it'll give it a 1910 sort of you know, the old sewing machines with the scrolly appointments and stuff. And here's the trunk lid. Just a simple, once again, gold and red stripe. So I'm in the process in the other room of making these stripes and applying them, and thought maybe we could just look at that procedure just for a moment. So let's go in the other room here and see what we're going to do. This is the body that the seat will sit on. I've got it propped up on a chair just so that I can stripe it at a better advantage angle. Let's come around to the side here. You can see the stripes I have on it already. I just think they're coming out good. This back one I've got the red on and a gold appointment, and I'm going to cut out a piece of gold stripe and finish this back piece. Alright, in one of my previous businesses, what I found out that there is such thing as double-bladed, let me hold this down where you can see it, double-bladed X-Acto knife blades. And there's different styles, but this is a stable one that doesn't seem to waver very much. And there's a little wheel there that you can turn it and adjust the width of the blades. I have gone ahead and set these two blades up for a width of tape stripe that I seem to like. And I'm going to apply a stripe, show you just how it's done. I just kind of press evenly. Hold the ladder, hold the ruler. I don't clamp the ruler, I just kind of hold it. Okay. Now I just take away the piece that's above it, throw it away. Clean all this up later. Make sure that the ends are square. Then I peel the stripe itself off. And I simply visually create my space, what I feel I'm going to need. And I begin applying it. I leave about the thickness of a stripe in between the two for space, and that allows me to visualize it. You have to stretch. The stuff's flexible, and if you stretch you can make it maneuver a little bit. Does take a little skill, I think. Okay, now hang on a minute. Let me get the blue knife. And if I just cut the stripe and not through to the paint, there we go. And then the little wrinkles that I get here I will burnish out later, actually with a piece of wood rather than this thing here. And in time the adhesive will bond in, and it will be like paint. These stripes will be like paint. Outdoors in the most adverse conditions, they guarantee that the material will last 8 years, but my experience is that it's been on cars that's 30 some years old, and you can polish it up and it still looks good, and the adhesion is, like I say, like paint. So I'm happy with pinstriping in this manner. So there we go, and I'm going to finish this carded pinstriping today. Well, this is kind of the exciting time on the carriage project, when you're down to things like the cloth top that goes over the wooden top bows. But she's sewing the pieces together. This is some black material that we got at Walmart. It was just under $8 a yard, and the yard was, of course, a yard by 56-inch web. So 2.5 yards just ends up perfect for covering the top. And then we have this Victorian-looking flower stuff that she's sewing into the what's going to be the underside of it for like a headliner, and also a stiffener. So we're delighted that our own little sewing machine will do this, and that's what this is about. I'm cutting the patterns and stuff as if I know. Good job, Wani. She'll appear on camera when we take our final ride. And there'll be lots of sewing like this. This isn't anything particularly complicated, making this top. As long as it comes out all right. We've got to watch for the wrinkles. That's when you stretch it over the wooden frames later, it's got to taper properly and graduate so that you don't have a lot of wrinkles. So we'll see what happens. We're getting there on this top. Now she's just temporarily stitching around the window framing, which is sort of a horizontal diamond, and that will hold it in place while she puts the permanent stitching in then on the machine. So I'm excited. It's coming along.
Want to see the little tiny pony over here?
They love to spark in the dark old park as they go flying along. She says she knows why the motor goes, the sparker's awfully strong. Each day they spoon to the engine tune, their honeymoon will happen soon. He'll win Lucille with his Oldsmobile, and then he'll fondly croon. Come away with me, Lucille, in my merry Oldsmobile. Down the road of life we'll fly, automobiling you and I. To the church we'll swiftly steal, then our wedding bells will peal. You can go as far as you like with me in my merry Oldsmobile. Come away with me, Lucille, in my merry Oldsmobile. Down the road of life we'll fly, automobiling you and I. To the church we'll swiftly steal, then our wedding bells will peal. You can go as far as you like with me in my merry Oldsmobile.